Hi everyone, I'm Esther. I'm really excited to be here. I'm one of the co-founders of HEMA, the company best known for its product Figma tokens. I'm also the creator of the headless design system concept, which I have been working on since 2020. I am from India, and currently I'm living and working from pretty high up in the North Indian Himalayas. The title of my talk today is Charting a Path from CSS Zen Garden to Token Zen Garden. So let's get started. But before we dive into the Zen Garden concept, let's pause a moment and define what a design token is. Since for the rest of this talk, it evolves around design tokens. So what is a design token? And most of you probably already familiar with design tokens, but for those of you who have not worked with design tokens, let's quickly look at two definitions. Adobe Spectrum defines design tokens as design tokens are all the values needed to construct and maintain a design system, spacing, color, typography, object styles, animation, etc., represented as data. While Material defines them as design tokens represent the small, repeated design decisions that make up a design system's visual style. Tokens replace static values such as hex codes for colors with self-explanatory names. For me personally, design tokens means a common language for designers and engineers to build digital products together more efficiently. Today we are talking about Token Zen Garden, but what has been the inspiration to build the Token Zen Garden? As many of you might be familiar, in the early days of CSS, there was something called the CSS Zen Garden, and it has since become a classic textbook example while talking about CSS. At this point, I would like to quote Dave's website, Dave is the person who created CSS Zen Garden. In 2003, nobody was using CSS beyond controlling basic fonts and colors. Those who understood its capabilities were rarely designers, and designers largely hadn't embraced it yet. And so, the perception spread that CSS was only capable of boxy and boring design. And those who understood what it was truly capable of were unable to convince their clients and their teams to take the necessary risk required to use it. It was around this time that Jeffrey Zellman brought a classic writing principle of show, don't tell over to the web and encouraged those of us who wanted the situation to change to stop talking about what CSS could do and start doing it already. Inspired by this idea, I created a site with the goal of being a collaborative gallery that would show what CSS could accomplish. And the simple requirement, a designer was unable to modify the HTML in any way. The entire design had to be accomplished through CSS and images alone. I really couldn't have phrased this any better. So let's have a quick look at CSS Zen Garden. If you see over here, these are the themes that have been submitted to CSS Zen Garden. We can switch between them. We can see completely different looking layouts and designs which has been created using the same underlying markup. The changes have been made purely by manipulating the CSS style sheet. Okay, so now that we have seen the CSS Zen Garden, let's quickly see how we can draw a parallel between design tokens. As we saw, only CSS could be used to change the design, and design tokens have a similarity here because they represent design decisions, which means we can change these decisions without actually changing any of the HTML or the CSS. I will be showing this later on. And one of the most common use cases of design tokens we all probably know is the light and dark mode we see in most websites today. We only change the color decisions, but the markup of the page stays the same. But we can do a lot more with design tokens, and that's what I would like to show with the Token Zen Garden. Until recently, design tokens were seen as something to be used by developers, and adoption among designers was largely restricted to tech-savvy designers. Or it was seen as a handoff chore done by designers for developers. And interestingly, even though they are called design tokens, designers had no access to them in design. This kind of leads me to tell you about how Figma tokens was born, answering the question of how do we bridge the gap and empower designers to use design tokens in design and benefit from it. Figma tokens, for those of you who have not tried it before, is a plugin for Figma, which allows designers to create and apply design tokens in Figma, link them to your code, and keep the two in sync. It's a bit like having styles for every design decision. And you can also achieve many of the same things developers would be able to do in code, for example, switching themes or using variables. Design tokens seem like an answer to a lot of design system questions, especially the ones concerning multi-brands or themes. But there are still some challenges that come with it. As I mentioned, adoption among designers is one of them, although this seems to be growing rapidly now. There are no standards yet, but we are almost reaching the first version of the spec by the W3C Designs Token Group. A big shout out at this point to the team. They're doing all this amazing work. And for teams adopting design tokens, they also usually face a number of other challenges on the way, such as naming, structure, and things like setting up the pipeline, which converts design tokens to consumable formats in different technology stacks. And of course, Style Dictionary has been a game changer here. So thinking about all this made me wonder what an ideal Token Zen Garden would look like. And if we are aspiring to have an impact like CSS Zen Garden, what are the things that would make Token Zen Garden meaningful for people or teams to start the design tokens journey? So I came to a conclusion that apart from being a place where we could see the power of design tokens and where people can demonstrate their skills, it must be more. It should be a place of inspiration, but also a place of learning and a place of getting started. It quickly became clear that a Token Zen Garden would need to cover 3 essential areas. First, using design tokens in design. How do I get started as a designer? And second, implementation. How do we use design tokens in code? And third, the pipeline. How do I move design decisions or design tokens from design to code and vice versa? And so, taking all of these things as the guiding principles, we set out to build Token Zen Garden. And that is what I would like to share with you today. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge that I'm probably not the first person talking about it or try to create something like this. So let me take a moment to recognize the ideas and people that I'm aware of. I'm sure many of us have read Brett Frost's article, Creating Themable Design Systems, which talked about how powerful design tokens can be in theming design systems. I also found a number of conversations on Twitter by people like Kalik, Tom Heller, and Gina Ann around Token Zen Garden and how it would look like. And it sounded like we needed to answer these tweets. I also found this really cool playground called Shaper. This has been created by HackAnn, who has created many other amazing tools as well. Well, Shaper allows you to see how an entire interface could be manipulated by only adjusting a few toggles and sliders, which are basically linked to values that are applied to the design. Mark Shenfrani built a CodePen example showing how the same button can be themed using component-specific design tokens. And I'm sure I haven't found everything on the topic, but if anybody else has been working on a Token Zen Garden or something amazing along the same lines, we would love to hear from you. You can tweet to me at Esther Cheran. I would like to take this moment now to also give a big shout out to Danny Banks for creating Style Dictionary, the people at DivRiot who put in a lot of engineering effort into creating an in-memory browser-based version of Style Dictionary, which saved us a lot of time while we were building Token Zen Garden. And Mark Andrew, who created the base template for Token Zen Garden using Kibana. Now let's have a look at what we have built. I'm first going to show you the Token Zen Garden website, which we launched today on tokenzengarden.design. This is the Token Zen Garden, and here we have something similar to CSS Zen Garden. Here we see a web page with a standard design. We have a hero header, a few sections like features, name cards, price cards, and a footer. And this is the default theme. Here we see a theme switcher which allows us to switch between light and dark themes. At the top of the page, we can see a navigation. This is to switch between different submissions, all using the exact same HTML and CSS. It is only the design tokens that are changing. Let's explore a few. Here's the next contribution. So every submission can have multiple themes, for example, a light, a dark, or high contrast mode. And it might look like these changes are not as drastic as CSS Zen Garden, but you can see the change in design of this page just by the change of design tokens. We also see a button here, and when we click it, it reveals the code editor. And the cool thing about this is it's all working live. So any changes here would actually reflect in real time. But more on this later. But how does this actually work? Well, in CSS Zen Garden, users had to submit a CSS file. And this is Token Zen Garden, but this also has a CSS file. So let's have a look. Of course, it would not be a Token Zen Garden if users had to upload a CSS file. But if you look here, you can see in the CSS file that it's loaded with design tokens. For example, these over here, button primary background has a token, button primary default background color. So how can you add a submission? And for that, we're going to look at the next part of the project, which is the Token Zen Garden community Figma file. And if you click here on click your own button, this will lead you to the Token Zen Garden community file. So here I have the file. I have already duplicated and opened it. And if you see here, you can see that the file is structured in a few areas. The first part is a bit of documentation. The second part holds a number of regular design system components. And if we go down further, there are some patterns. And at the bottom of the page, we can see the different sections of the web page. After I built my headless design system and showed it to the world for the first time, a lot of designers found it meaningful to study my tokens and Figma files. I shared these, and it ended up with people studying them and using it as a source of inspiration to start building their own tokenized design system. So apart from building a team for Token Zen Garden, I feel that this is a great file to deconstruct or study and get a better understanding of how design tokens were used to build components, patterns, and even some layouts. And while this file was never meant to be an enterprise-level integration of design tokens, it still is a great place to start seeing and understanding the full power of design tokens. And this again was one of the inspirations for building something like this. Let's take a closer look. On the right-hand side here, we can see a screenshot of the Figma Tokens plugin, which we will be using. And here we see the same design that we just saw on the website, Token Zen Garden. This is a fully tokenized design. The documentation here on the left covers how theming can be done, either on a high level using just a subset of semantic tokens, or by changing things on a more granular level, for example, individual patterns or sections. Let me quickly open the Figma Tokens plugin. So if you see here, there's quite a number of tokens and token sets in here. But how we have built it is to give a realistic example to show you concepts like semantic tokens, which can help you build a theme quite easily. And there are a lot of other tokens which will allow those who are interested to dive deeper, make very granular design decisions on this page. But as it will take a bit of time to understand, I'm not going to dive into the token architecture of this project today. But as I mentioned before, the documentation on this page explains all the tokens of this project in great detail. But what I really want to show you today is how we can, as a designer or an engineer, build your own theme and submit it to the Token Zen Garden. Before I dive into the tokens and the plugin, let me first show what I just showed in the browser works in Figma as well. Let's quickly go back to the Token Zen Garden. And we had the drop down here, which allowed us to switch between the different themes, the light and the dark. Now let's quickly jump back to Figma. Let me go to the page preview here. As you can see here in the plugin, there's also a drop-down showing the same themes we just saw on the website. And this is a fully connected design using design tokens. Okay, let's now make a simple but a new theme. While you can go ahead and study the different design tokens and create a theme from scratch, here every token can be overwritten or changed. But to get started easy, we have already created a base theme consisting of a light and dark. And the easiest way to start is by changing the design decisions in these two light and dark sets over here on the left. Let's first take a look at the light set. As you can see, there's quite a few tokens in here. Like I mentioned, this might look a bit overwhelming at first. But all the tokens are well documented across the different sections on this page, so don't worry. And just like the CSS Zen Garden, it will require you to spend a little time playing around and finding your way to build a theme. And while I tried to keep this easy to get started, I also wanted to have enough tokens in here to allow users to express themselves. For this demo, I'm just going to go through a few token changes and show you how you can easily find the tokens in the documentation that you need to change. Let's say that I have a brand which has blue as the primary color with generally rounded corners and a super funky font face. We'll take a look at some of the generic semantic tokens. For example, the accent color, which is used across the page for buttons and some backgrounds. And here is the color section. We have a small group of semantic colors. We're going to change the different color tokens under accent. And while I'm changing these tokens, do keep an eye on the preview on the right-hand side to see the token changes happening in real time. Okay, so now we have updated the color palette. The next thing I would like to change is the overall corner radius of UI elements, as my brand has a more round feel to it. We first navigate to the border radius section. This is where all the radii tokens are grouped. As you can see over here, there are two tokens, components and UI. I'm going to change both of them. And as you can see, the example on the right now has rounded corners everywhere. Now let's move to the font section in the tokens and change the font family for our headings. As we can see here, we have three tokens, heading, caption, and body. We'll change the heading token. And there, we can see the change in the font family. Okay, that looks great already. And there's another thing that I would like to change, and this is in the hero section. Here I would like to hide this small image over here. Let's quickly check the documentation and see what token we have that we can change. If you go to the documentation here, you can see the small image has an opacity token attached to it, and this will allow us to hide the image. So back in the plugin, I'll scroll to the opacity section where I found the section.hero.image opacity token. Let's give this a value of 0, and there we go. The image is gone. Now let's change the hero background image. And for this, we'll be using the asset token. Let's scroll all the way down to the asset token over here. As you can see, there's an asset token available for every section. But for this example, we're just going to change the hero. I have already copied an image URL from Unsplash over here. Now I'm going to use that. And this will work for any image available on a public URL. So there we go. Our hero has now a new background image. And I think it's really powerful to see that within just 4 steps, we have a really different looking theme. Of course, I could make many more changes and make a very unique theme, but for the purpose of this demo, I think I'll finish my theme here. This brings us to the next step of my demo, trying out or submitting your theme on tokenzengarden.design. And the last thing that's left for us here in Figma is exporting the design tokens that we just changed. Let's export the files from the export menu in the plugin. There we go. Now let's open up the Token Zen Garden website. And these are the tokens that I just downloaded. And let's upload it over here. We can drag the folder anywhere on the page. And that's it. You can see your tokens in action on the page. Over here, if you see, you can see all the tokens coming out of Figma tokens. And Style Dictionary has converted all my design tokens in JSON format into CSS variables. Here is the build file. We can see the themes created neatly with the CSS variables. If you feel like studying the Style Dictionary config, you can check out the transformtokens.js file over here. As a last exercise, let's do one thing. Let's go to my tokens folder. Let's go to light.json and change one of the colors, the semantic accent default, to red. Okay, let's find this here. We'll change this to red, and if I save this, you can see this changes the design, and you can easily create a theme in Token Zen Garden without going into Figma or using Figma tokens. It is a full-featured playground. For all the developers in the crowd, if you're curious to play with this, or all you have to do is click on the download button over here and open it in VS Code and run yarn. Let's quickly do that. Okay, let's run yarn install. And yarn build. And there you have it, your own Style Dictionary pipeline running with your HTML file and your CSS file with design token setup. All you have to do now is push it to your repository, connect the tokens to Figma tokens, and you have a great example, which is a great starting point for any designer and engineer to start working together on implementing design tokens in your project. And with this, I've come to an end of my presentation. I would love it if you would play around with the Token Zen Garden, create your own themes. I would love to hear any feedback or comments. Thank you.
Hello, everybody at Clarity. I am here with Esther Cheran, and we are going to talk about Token Zen Garden. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Sam, and thank you once again.
Thank you for being here with us. Where are you right now?
I'm in India actually right now, and in Himachal Pradesh and the North Himalayas, and yeah, it's quite high up here.
Yeah, I saw the talk and saw all the mountains in the background, and that was really beautiful. So thank you for joining us and doing this. And I also want to say thank you so much for bringing some of the memories of CSS Zen Garden back and thinking about it in a new way. That was a big part for me as I was starting to learn CSS or expand on what CSS3 could do at that time. It was a big part of that. So congratulations for that. You've been demoing a tool with us. Can you remind folks where they can find Token Zen Garden?
Yeah, so I think Token Zen Garden is really inspired by CSS Zen Garden, and I hope that this also sparks the kind of imagine how it can a CSS Zen Garden kind of like sparked imagination of people regarding CSS. Maybe this will also spark the imagination for design tokens, and you can find it at tokenzengarden.design. You can go over there, check it out, play around with it, submit your, just play around with it and submit your theme. And yeah, I hope you guys will find it nice and helpful for design tokens.
Yeah, I think it really will be helpful. As you went through your talk, you were showing it, in the browser, everything is updating right there. And I think that allows people to collaborate really quickly. And that was really exciting to see. Um, what you're doing is bringing designers and developers together too in the process that you showed. Can you share a little bit more about the collaboration that you'd like to see?
Yeah, so I personally really believe that design tokens is a common language that can be shared between designers and engineers. And I think what this really means is that design tokens can bring about collaboration between these two disciplines, which can be seen as like very separate without having to step on each other's toes, because you can kind of like use design tokens, like a designer can use design tokens in design, and an engineer can use design tokens in code, and they're actually using the same thing. And uh, what I've tried to show with Token Zen Garden is that how this pipeline can have like this two-way sync, which is like real time, so that, even if designers are using it in design or in code, there's always like this sync. So there's always like this, there is no part of it which is like not syncing to each other. It's always like a single source of truth for your designs and code, basically. And as I mentioned in my presentation, that I am using Figma tokens, the plugin, and this is where you can like author your design tokens, so you can create and you can apply them on design. And this design tokens, they can be stored in any remote Git provider like GitHub or GitLab, and you can like sync it to through Figma tokens. And this is something that even the engineers can access and they can modify, basically. And then I have in this pipeline, we have also used like style dictionary, which can actually convert these design tokens into something that can be used in code.
I really love how you talked about this being a common language between designers and engineers. I think I'm going to be thinking about that for a really long time. I think a lot of times as we're working between teams, we're always trying to find ways to speak each other's languages. So I think thinking about design tokens in that way is really beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit more about process, right? You talked about this pipeline as we just went through your talk and the last question, where you were thinking of three things as you were building this. You were thinking about the design side, then the code side, and then the interaction between those two sides. Outside of these three areas that you were thinking about, is there anything else you think designers and developers should be doing to ensure that they are experimenting and implementing design tokens?
So I think when you're talking about design tokens in, like as I mentioned, right, in design and in code, and the implementation between the two, there's space between designers and developers where they can actually collaborate and where they need to come to like a consensus. I think one of those areas is kind of like the naming convention of design tokens, because, as such, the naming convention of design tokens can be really hard. Like, how do you actually name a token, right? And there could be like so many different parts of a name to make each other understand, okay, this is what we're going to name. But I think the most important part over there is having like a consensus on like, okay, this is the kind of the naming convention that we want to have. And and I think in the future, we could also think about like, okay, what would a design token or a naming of a design token look like, right? Maybe we can have something which is more of like a contextual API where we do not need to name tokens as such with all these very long names, but we can actually say that, okay, I'm a token for a button belonging to this brand in this maybe an enterprise environment, and what are the different how do I visually look? I can kind of like have a query for that, and you kind of have all the values that you need for a button to how it should look in a particular environment. So I mean, we're not there yet, so until that time I think we will still struggle with a bit of naming.
Yeah,
And yeah.
I love that you're thinking about that too. That's really
Yeah.
great. Naming things is hard. I think we see a lot of conversations about tokens, design systems, naming things in general is really tough. I think it'll be interesting to see if some of the same sort of naming conventions that we've seen in the CSS side of things maybe inspire future naming systems for tokens. That's a really great point. Now I'm going to be thinking about the names of things for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could take notes during a Q&A. but then it would be asking questions. So moving on, going back to Figma tokens, the plugin. You
Yeah.
also mentioned using style dictionary and some other tools in this process. Can you share more about the work that you've done with Figma tokens and the building of Token Zen Garden?
Sure. So I think I've mentioned this in the presentation as well. And one of the key problems that we wanted to solve as Figma tokens as a team, we really wanted to see design tokens being used in design, because I think up till that point, there was no tool that was allowing it design tokens to be used in design. And I think that having this ability or empowering designers is so powerful, because now you are not really just trying to imagine, okay, this is my design token, how is it really going to look like in my design? You have like this feedback loop, really powerful feedback loop. You apply design tokens, you update something on the design tokens, you can immediately see in your Figma files, right? Okay, I'm changing this border radius from 2 to 4. Okay, now you have something that is changing in your designs. And I think that is also kind of like the foundation, or one of the thoughts that I had for building Token Zen Garden, that now you have something in using Figma tokens, you can see the changes in design. But to have a quick way of changing all the design tokens, modifying them, and then, like quickly seeing that how is it looking in code as well. So that feedback loop was also kind of like one of the things that inspired. And yes, we use a style dictionary, and I think I just mentioned this before, like how flexible style dictionary is in terms of like converting design tokens, which are mostly in like JSON format, at least in Figma tokens, into any format that can be used across any tech stack, right? It's up to the team to kind of manipulate it and use it. Also, you can use it kind of like out of the box. And then DivRiot, they had actually built this in browser-based style dictionary, which is like a real-time, you can actually run it real-time, and that's what we actually can build Token Zen Garden upon. And I think that is really powerful, because you kind of like, as I showed you in the presentation, right, you kind of like drag and drop your tokens, and the style dictionary kind of like runs immediately, and then you can see the changes in the browser. So yeah, that was kind of like the whole pipeline that was used, and the thought behind the whole tool.
That's so cool. I mean, the way that you're using sort of the live updates is really fascinating, because as designers, we get to see things change live when that happens in Figma. And when I think of those early days of CSS Zen Garden, there was, well, I'm going to upload my files and hope that it appears online, that they'll upload it and use an FTP server to get things uploaded. Now we're at this place where we're supercharged in our process, because we are able to get that that browser refresh and live reload to work right away. And I think that's going to speed up a lot of people's work, allow them to experiment more,
Exactly.
which I love. You know, you talked about color being the most common thing that we tend to work between the two themes, but that there's just so much more that we can do with design tokens. Well, I am so excited for people to get to tinker and play with design tokens through the Token Zen Garden. I also want to give you a shout out for the shout outs you were giving everybody else. It's really cool to see the design systems community and design token communities really work together to come up with ideas and be inspired by each other. So my last question for you is, how can our audience here at Clarity help you and support Token Zen Garden?
Yeah, before that, before I answer, actually, I think I would like to kind of get a little bit nostalgic to the time when I was just entering this space. So I actually come from like a product management background, and I was entering the design system space. And when I was entering this space, I found that this design system community is like has a very nice and a vibrant ecosystem, and I found like people talking, sharing ideas and a lot of knowledge. It really helped me grow, and it really helped my transition at back that time. And it's just such a nice community, like where you have so many people sharing ideas and knowledge, and there's so many spaces like Twitter or the design system community Slack. And I think this is like one of a small contribution that I also wanted to make. And as I got involved in building our product, and while talking to a lot of teams who were using our products, that it gave me some insights into some of the roadblocks or some of the problems or some of the issues that the teams were facing. So I thought maybe using those learnings could kind of like provide like a platform where people could experiment, where people could also showcase what is possible, and also it could become like a place of learning. And as I've mentioned before, like design tokens in design, in code, and kind of like the in-between part, right? So I think what I would like to ask of the community right now is that I'm sure I would have missed something, and there's always like a lot of room for improvement. And I would like to kind of like have like a call out for people, if there's any feedback, or if you can help me grow this into and evolve this into something much better, something which can be really useful. I would really, really love that. And if anybody has any ideas around it, I would really love to talk. You can just kind of like reach out to me on Twitter or any of the Slacks. Yeah, and that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. I was just going to ask, where can people find you? So Twitter and any of the Slacks. I'm assuming the Design System Slack is a good place to find
Yes.
you. Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this very new, exciting tool that we're going to get to use.
Awesome. I was excited. I'm excited to see how people will use it.
Me too. I can't wait.
Yeah.